The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in.
My car keys.
It's like a magical.
They're being used for
kinda-
evil, but it's not my fault.
No, it's not evil. We're transitioning into it's magic. It's
That's
like,
evil.
magic
You know he doesn't like
is
it.
Evil.
I don't like
He hates magic.
I love magic. I want to be magic.
I don't think he likes irritating boyfriends.
Psh, whatever. Then he knows who he chose.
Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics.
Yeah!
Kayla's back.
I am! I missed you guys.
Kayla.
Did you hear what Jered said about you in the last episode?
Oh, that about me being replaced? I really focused on you being like, are you kidding me? I could not do the show without her. With you alone.
First of
I
all,
was like, haha.
I wrote those on a cue card and held them up and he said it. So that came from me.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, it didn't.
Feel like
It did not.
feel like it did.
I've known him longer, so, sorry.
That is true. Kayla was here first.
Hey, you
I
guys
was.
have met.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Anyway, I'm Noah.
Kayla!
Jered.
Good job, guys.
Yeah. We are, by the way, getting really good at the whole naming ourselves thing.
I know. This time I picked it up right after he
100%.
introduced us.
100%.
I mean, to be fair, we never said like who was going to go after I said my name, so I'm glad that Kayla was like, I'm just going to do it
Yeah.
this
Well,
time.
I still think it's weird. We do it every other time.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Eventually people will start realizing who we are when we talk. So today we are talking about comic book writers. And I think it's a good episode because I don't feel like they get too much credit that they deserve. They do, but they don't. And I feel like people don't talk about them as much.
Heck yeah. It's, who knows if this is going to be good. It hasn't
That's for the listeners.
been
to decide.
written yet. Yeah.
Do. I could talk about writers all day, every day.
Well, I was going to say, because you said they don't get a lot of credit, which is kind of true, because it's like not a glamorous industry in a certain way. But I was also thinking it's a good time for comics for writers, because writers do kind of run the shit now in a way that I think they didn't in the 90s.
Well, I just think it's more of like Twitter has somebody to blame for somebody killing the character they like. So
Yeah, that's a good point. But what I mean is in the 90s, artists were kind of the stars, and lo and behold, the writing sucked.
Yeah.
Like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and all this amazing, but the writing, just
I feel like they're both kind of on par with each other now. It's like, and I like how now you can really tell the writer or the artist, vice versa. They really pick each other for the type of story they're
I
going for.
love that.
Yeah. And like, I mean,
how do they pick each other? Though? It's like a spin the bottle thing. Like,
I mean,
You know who you work well with. Don't pretend
that's
you don't.
true. Or they're like,
I
oh,
don't
that artwork would go really good with this story. Or I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how they do it.
it's a cool shakeup when you get a good team together.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Well, and I think both parts are equally important in the comic medium. You know, don't ignore the artist. Don't ignore the writer.
We will be ignoring the artist for this.
Okay, but
Just-
only because we're going to be spotlighting our favorite artists later.
That's absolutely.
That's going to be a challenge only because this is an audio medium and we're going to be talking about a visual one. So it's like, yeah, this is pretty, guys.
Sure.
Yeah, take our word for it,
Yeah.
or better yet, Google
Go look
an
at
image.
it. Yeah.
Buy a comic.
And I just want to back up real quick and say this is cool because it's like the first time we kind of talked about the industry a little bit. You know what I mean? Like most of the time we focus on like content in the books,
The characters.
and in this case, it's sort of these are people that bring it to you and stuff like that. And we're only gonna say so much because you can't really go into everything.
Yeah, this
about
isn't a
it.
biography of our favorite writers.
Yeah, because that could easily be an episode on one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But maybe we should say something about writing in comic books. And because I think what's interesting about it is, and people lose this a bit, is that, a lot of writing principles apply. A lot of what makes a great writer in any medium applies, character story and stuff like that. But there's some stuff that's pretty particular to comic books. And I think you've already mentioned it, which is it's an inherently collaborative art most of the time. So because it's not outside of a few magical people like Frank Miller or Walt Simonson or a few others, most of the time it's a writer who's who's giving a script to an artist, and they have to trust that person
can translate it.
Can do it. Yeah.
And I've always been curious. I mean, I'm sure I could look this up and find it out, but just thinking about how the writer writes the script.
Yeah.
And because you'll see things like images in comics where there's nothing, no dialogue or anything on the page. It's just artwork. So I've always been curious, is it the artist and the writer I just thinking about how the script is written. It's like, make sure you put Blue Beetle doing this.
I bet it is. Dave Gibbons famously said Alan Moore, like that's the team from Watchmen, if you're familiar, said he's really hard. There were real challenges in the way Alan Moore writes, because he would write things like, the dust motes floated in the wind. That's my spot on Alan Moore impression, by the way.
Weird.
And Dave Gibbons was like, how do you, I don't know how to depict that artistically, but like they found a way to translate it.
Yeah, that's a more articulate way of what
Well, if you've read scripts or plays, you would kind of have an idea about how that might go. They do like little descriptions. It's just like a paragraph. It doesn't all have to be dialogue. And then, of course, artist interpretation is important, but...
Yeah, they have to build that relationship. And I think what's interesting, too, probably like with actors and directors and stuff, different artists probably want different levels of direction. So it's like, I think some people, love the idea of, hey, just give me the basic breakdown and I'll go outward and I'll just create and everything, versus like, I don't want to just tell me if he punches him with his left hand or his right hand. I need to know.
I think that kind of goes back to what Noah was mentioning about how like sometimes now in comics there's like iconic duos, like an artist and a writer that really like they work together over and over again. And I think it's because they probably have a better understanding of what
they have,
each other wants.
Love language going on.
I believe
where it's like, Blue Beetle, I got you. I know what to do.
He looks away. Oh, I got this.
I love they have their own love language. They do most of their collaboration in one of those baths that are connected and they're facing each other.
Bubbles and champagne.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds so cute.
And how about this? To add to that, I think it's funny. There are certain writers that I don't want to criticize too much, but there's certain writers where I almost only like them when they're with a certain artist.
Yeah.
Don't know how that works. Good example, and Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale.
Oh, yes.
Long Halloween, I think they did Hulk Gray. They've done a lot of work together. And it's not that I don't like Jeff Loeb. I think he's a great writer. But I only kind of love him when he does stuff with Tim Sale. It just works. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, like when I was kind of referencing like, good team ups, that's kind of what was in my head. That was the first comic that came to my head. It was Long Halloween, because part of that story is the art. I feel like the art really makes that story, and that's when you know it's a good team, because I'm trying to think of other artists that could have drawn that, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd want, some of these artists doing that writing, because I just feel like it just makes it so much better, and it gives a different feel and a tone to the entire story.
You mentioned something, and it just spawned this... Lightning has just struck my brain.
Oh, God. The voices are back.
Sorry. No, but you know what I would love to see? I'd love to see a comic script depicted like by 4 different artists. Wouldn't that be cool?
What do you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is like you never get to see the opposite.
That would be awesome.
You see a script and then you see some version of some artist depiction, and then that's it. Wouldn't it be really cool to see like just picking up Brian Michael
pick a
Bendis
one
script,
shot and then have it done by like 4 or 5 different artists?
And I know that's not what this episode is about, like our great ideas, but I was like, that's such a cool thing that you just mentioned.
That would be cool.
That would be pretty cool.
But I guess what is cool about that too is that like there's this skill in comic writing we don't even think about, which is not just the writing aspect, but your ability to communicate to another person well, to say, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
And the emotional communication to be like not an asshole.
Yeah.
It's like, do this and do that, to get the best out of another an artist that's in a different medium. That's insane.
It's hard. I mean, that's when you're working with a team, one of the most important parts. And I want to mention up top how difficult it is for writers to write for an existing IP, especially one that's been around as long as some of these comic book characters have been, because they're under an intense amount of scrutiny from, I don't know, the other executives, the other writers and artists at Marvel or DC or their comic book place, but also the audience who loves these characters. And if if a writer does something, if there's a tiny piece of dialogue that seems out of character, they're going to be like dragged through the streets for it.
Yeah. I mean, for them to have, depending on who they're writing, 80 years of history of this character. I mean, give or take, they do retcons and reboots and stuff, but you have to take all of that into account when you do it.
Yeah.
And to take this on, I mean, I would never want to be a writer for a comic book. I mean, I would make my own character, start fresh.
I mean, that's really interesting unto itself, like the difference between those two things. But no, I think y'all are both absolutely right. Like, they get crap from every direction. And like you did, I mean, what you sort of just indicated two forms of that. One is just the industry pressure, because this is also this is a monthly thing.
Yeah.
So you have to come out with something.
Sometimes weekly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And usually they have more people working on it, but it's still the deadlines are there. And so they have to make choices that are difficult and everything like that. And also the hatred that we could do a podcast episode that was just about the various ways
poor fandom reaction.
Absolutely. It's insane.
Want to. In the trailer episode, I said we would talk about.
I just think that, I mean, it'd be an interesting topic, but a slippery slope.
I just want to go on Twitter and just read tweets of just these people just.
Okay, that sounds like a fun bit.
And that's some good Patreon content.
That's true.
That's some good Patreon content.
Because recently I think I showed you guys this on Instagram, somebody was quoting somebody else about Aquaman and how they were just kind of like, oh, there's a Toto cover in it. It's awful. It's the worst movie ever.
I remember you.
Yeah. And like, I watched a movie about a tree and a rocket squirrel, and I was like, first off,
oh no,
it's a raccoon.
Yeah.
That was the thing I was most mad about.
If you care enough to criticize, like, just get the basic facts right.
Yeah.
But let's distinguish this, and because I think this is interesting. There's a difference between bad writing and a choice you don't agree with for a character, and I think I see that criticism online all the time. It's like, okay, let's say you don't want Spider-Man to turn into a real spider. That was a story back that, he was mutating further. You don't like the idea for that story, but that doesn't mean the writing's bad. It could be brilliantly executed. It could be well paced. The characterization could be wonderful. It can have 1, 2, 3 acts and stuff like that. Ironically, you might not like it if they make Spider-Man a black Dominican kid, but it's still good writing. And the funny thing to me is that first one got way less criticism than the second one.
With Miles Morales.
So you'd rather Spider-Man be a spider monster than a young black. Anyway, getting off topic.
No, that's a can of worms.
Yeah,
I'm really upset that you mentioned the difference between bad writing and people disagreeing, because it's not limited to the comic medium. And I know this is a podcast about comics, so I'll try to keep it, on topic.
I think we should say that Kayla is a writer, so this is like her thing.
Yeah,
yes, it's just I would guess 33.33333 repeating of my tweets are about like me being so mad about people about television shows like Game of Thrones or just video game writing when they're like, this is bad writing. And it's like, no, you just disagree with that decision.
Yeah.
That's fine. The writing is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's the fact that people can't distinguish that is weirdly like negating of their own criticism, because it's like, if you can't distinguish those two things, and there's overlap. Of course, there's a way of making a decision in a comic book that probably is bad for the concept or is going to be limited or is inherently difficult, but they are different things. So if you can't tell the difference, then you're probably you shouldn't be sending hate mail.
Yeah.
To your, and we're all in some sense writers here. Like, so you write stories, I write jokes, and Noah writes basically the podcast. Like, what I mean? It's an inherently creative endeavor, and we do get negative criticism sometimes, and it's like, yeah, well, you've never done this.
Yeah.
Well, and part of me too, I've always been hesitant. I mean, I don't like to say this is bad writing. I will definitely voice my opinion of like, I don't like this. Why are you doing this? But then also I kind of have to think of, well, what would I do? I mean, I'm not writing it. So how would I possibly be able to get to this point in the story?
No, there's a good example in my brain as how I distinguish. Noah's going to hate me, right? Okay. So bad writing would be like the first episode of Titans. That writing was bad. The writing was so bad. It was cliche and just, ugh.
And you're specifically, and this is worth talking about too, you're specifically talking about, if I remember correctly, sort of the dialogue.
Yes, the dialogue. Well, even the plot points too, but I just think...
That was stood out to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of the actions even were cliche about what the characters were doing. The dialogue was bad. And then good writing that had like kind of a bad response would be like Lady Thor. Yeah. Where the writing was actually fantastic, but people didn't like that Thor lost his power. And they were upset. And they were like, that's bad writing. No, that writing for that story was great.
We'll get into it because I want to spotlight some of that. But like, yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I was thinking too, there's so many different pieces of writing that can go good, bad. And we all look for different things. I think maybe it would be interesting if we just kind of go around here and talk about like, this is what I need for a writer. Like if they're good at this is what I like. Do you guys want to kind of, Noah, do you want to do that?
Oh, you want me to start?
You don't have to. I can
round robin.
Yeah.
For a good, I mean, I guess what I look for in comics, I love the superhero aspect of it, but I like seeing my superheroes in real life situations or seeing their relationships. So a good example, and I'm going to be talking about this in a minute, but in the Mr. Miracle series, you had Big Barda and Scott Free just like on a date and like on the beach and stuff.
Yeah.
Right after a battle or right before a battle. And to me, it was just like, this is beautiful only because you don't ever get to really see this. You always see them fighting Darkseid or, fighting Thanos and all this stuff. And that's great. That's why we read comics, but also I'd like to see the inner struggles. I love drama. I need drama in these comics.
That intersection of like heroes and their humanity. Fantastic. Noah sent just a panel on some sort of Facebook or Twitter conversation. No, it was a Facebook argument about whether Batman's a bad guy or not. And
it was if Batman is a cop. Yeah, I was fuming.
Well, it was kind of a political thing, but point being is that you sent a panel that I think it's a Tom King story where it was Superman and Batman arguing about like whether they should be in a. Well, you should break it down a little bit.
Is it the
elevator? Yeah,
yeah. It was one of the runs where Lois Lane and Superman and Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne were going on a double date, but they were meeting each other.
Hilarious.
Yeah, and they were both in the elevator, and they both get out, and it's kind of like Superman's like. Or Lois is like, you can fly. Why'd you take the elevator? And the Batman can scale buildings. Why did you take the elevator? It was just a really cool kind of normal thing to see them interact.
Yeah.
But it was structured like a joke in a way because it's like you have Superman and Batman kind of going back and forth in 3 panels. And the 4th panel is just sort of a pause. And Lois is like, you must be Catwoman.
Like, anyway.
It felt so real. And no, I agree. And we talked about sporting characters. And I think that plays very much into that. It's like they really have to inhabit a real life and be real people, or the hero thing, as great as that conceit is just not going to work.
Well, I mean, you have like, so to give an example, you have Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman. They know each other inside and out. They've been through all these things together. But their supporting characters, Steve Trevor, Lois Lane, and Selena Kyle, or even Alfred, they know them more than they do.
Yeah.
So I feel like a good writer has to be able to know that and to play on that. And that's why I sent that panel, because that is a good example, because it's so funny to see them kind of interact and be like, oh, these idiots are doing what they're doing, but let's meet each other for the first time here.
Yeah,
but I feel like a good writer really needs to understand everything about the character and not just be like, oh, this is Alfred. He makes me sandwiches, cucumber sandwiches. That's it. It's like, no, that's not all he does.
Yeah.
But yeah. What about you, Kayla?
I think the most important thing for me is characterization. So like a firm grasp of the characters' personalities, their actions, and why they do the things that they do. So it doesn't matter if there's like an alternate universe, one-off, spin-off, whatever, of like Batman and the Robins in a Victorian era society. As long as they have a firm grasp of the characters, I'm going to love that story because I recognize Tim Drake in that context. I recognize all of the side characters. And also kind of a breath of originality into stories. Because I feel like, especially with comic books and the history behind them, if I mean, it can get a little formulaic. So
Sure.
I think taking like this content that's been around forever and giving it your fresh spin, your point of view, that's kind of important. So
That thing you mentioned, the characterization, like it is funny how even in a fictional medium, you can be right or wrong about would Tim Drake do that?
yeah, exactly. And again, like you can do all sorts of things, like put them in space, put them underwater, put them back in the dinosaur era. Like it doesn't matter, but as long as you have a firm grasp of the characters, it's a recognizable story.
Absolutely. And I feel like at some level that is the grounded part of this in an otherwise almost like at times grandiose and psychedelic sort of thing. Cause there's a way where it's like Tim Drake could be infected with a virus that gives him the power of a Kryptonian.
Yep.
But he could not be mean to a cat.
Yep.
And then, I mean, like, that's really cool because that's who Tim is. Right
yeah, exactly.
And like for me, I was thinking, and I've thought about this a lot because of some radical shakeups in characters I love, which is that there still has to be a story arc and a character arc for these characters. And there's a way where as fans, we don't like change and it's difficult. And I'm not saying everything needs to be radical or something like that, but in each story arc, I think when a new writer comes on, it's like, I need you to give me a thing that, I don't know, Nightcrawler is going through. He needs to be going, it can't be completely static. It's got to be the same in some ways. He's got to stay true to his character.
So kind of just like dynamic stories.
Yeah, he's got to be going through something. His mom, like, you know, and they've been able to do a lot of stuff without fundamentally, I think at some level, hurting these characters because it'll be like, oh, he found out Mystique is his mom. So now he's going through like this issue about maternity and like who he really is and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I think still remembering it's like, yeah, we have to observe that Superman stays Superman, but he's got to have some sort of like character arc in all the stories or there's nothing compelling, you know? Yeah.
Well, like tangentially, it kind of goes back to when people cry, bad writing, it's bad writing. Sometimes they do that when a character kind of regresses in stories like you were mentioning.
Absolutely.
I'm like, that's actually, it happens in real life. You know, people go backwards. They aren't always improving themselves.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's important to be represented in comics too. So in stories like you were mentioning, I feel like it's not bad writing if they're getting worse mentally.
People are crazy sometimes. I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh no, I was going to say, who hasn't taken their ex back?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I guess just me.
We're just like,
or begged for their old job back. I think that's a sad one.
Or put in their 2 weeks notice and then try to be like, no, forget about that 2 weeks.
can I take that back, please?
Jered
that's
did
a
that.
reference. I did that. Yeah. I was a little mad. And
He put in a 2 weeks notice out of like anger and frustration, and then like
but I need a job.
Yeah,
so.
a week after that, he's like, hey, can I?
Well,
like, take
what's
that
weird
back?
is I had a fellow employee convince me I should. He was like, "Yeah, maybe you shouldn't have left." And I was like, "You know what? I shouldn't have." Oh well. And she was like, "Well, you should just ask." And then I asked, and they said no. I was like, "You knew the whole time." No, I don't know. But anyway, back to comic books. Actually, that threw me for a loop. Oh no, the regression thing with Cyclops. We talked about him through AVX. If you followed the podcast, yeah.
Him.
Stop! Yeah, I know.
Leave him alone.
No.
Yeah.
In that story, I don't like him.
But the thing is, people complain to a number of different writers because that was a big group sort of thing, that slow journey into like not goodness that Cyclops over 4 or 5 years. And people were really mad because they were like, well, I love Cyclops. It's like, yeah, we get that. But does that mean nothing bad can happen to a
Go
character?
on that
like,
journey with him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like what are you, a bandwagon fan of
Yeah,
comic books?
exactly.
If you don't love them at their word or handle them, you know the thing. That if you can't handle them at their
Comic
lowest.
books are kind of like a relationship. There's up and downs.
Yeah.
There's roller coasters.
There's a disclaimer here that Rick is an exception to this rule because
oh, it's
it's a
character I like.
personality change.
Yeah.
As opposed to a natural progression of his character.
Yeah, that's
just
a good point.
my disclaimer.
But
We'll see. Oh, let's just catch him up real quick. Nightwing, if you don't know, was shot in the head. Phineas Gage style, lost his personality, so he's Rick now. And Kayla is over a barrel. I don't know what's the best way to.
She's slumped down in her chair at the moment. She hates any mention of Rick.
Yeah. Rick has become the boogeyman. Rick is the opposite of Loki to this podcast. I mean,
To be fair, though, knowing Tom King, or I don't know him, but knowing his writing,
Your
and
best
We talk on Twitter. It's not a big deal.
I mean, anyway. Sorry. I feel like it could be a progression for him, though. I mean, he's gonna come back. Dick Grayson has to come back. If he doesn't, then I will say, yeah, this is terrible. I'm just holding out for him coming back and it being a journey that he had to go on.
But why? It's not like it was a natural, like, things in his life happened.
Oh no, he got shot in the head randomly.
Exactly.
Well, we'll see how they handle it, because at some level it's like, yeah, it's an accident. Those happen. Those have to be in comics.
It wasn't an accident.
No, but I mean, like, it was a
like KGB's
No, sure. Yeah.
aimed for his head.
Well, okay, so it was an on purpose. So he had an on purpose. But but it's one of those things where it was not organic to his character, but maybe he'll deal with it when he comes out of that in an organic way. Fingers crossed.
Hopefully.
Oh, here's an experiment, just real quick. How do you write him out of that? Like, if it was up to you, you can be like, it's not good. Like, so you're the writer coming in, and you have to deal with the fact that he's Rick. How do you unrick him? How do you de-rick him?
It
was all a dream.
No. Cop-out answer.
I hate that.
I don't know about how I would de-rickify him, but in terms of how I would make him deal with the ramifications of this incident happening would be he does something completely out of Dick Grayson's character as Rick, and then Dick Grayson has to deal with what Rick did and be like, that was a part of me, or something like that.
Or, like that, what if the trauma of the deeply Rick action awakens, this is going to sound weird, the Dick inside him. Okay, I want to back up and have not said that.
Okay.
But you get the point.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Well, okay, this is kind of a spin-off conversation, but when I was looking at an application for BioWare as a contract writer for one of their projects. It was an unnamed project, but you, in order to submit the application, you had to write a conversation or a little short story involving their characters from an existing IP. And if you know me at all,
Dragon Age?
I'm obsessed with Dragon Age and Mass Effect. I am constantly playing those games and replaying those games over and over and over, making the same decisions because that's who I am as a person. I can't be
marrying the same person.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have my husbands there. Yeah. But it's hard. I couldn't do it, and I hate myself for not being able to just sit down and try. Mm-hmm. But writing for that existing IP is so hard. Yeah. So the pressure that these writers and comics are under is just intense.
I'm glad you circled back to that, because I think that I think constraints are also good for creativity.
Yeah.
So there's something interesting there.
It's nice to have like background characters already set up.
Yeah.
People to work with and play.
I in sort of preparation for this episode, I listened to an interview with Grant Morrison. And I don't want to do him because I'm not a huge Grant Morrison fan, but he's great. So I just thought, okay, this will be a kind of interesting thing. And he was talking about, you'd think that he would love Insane Freedom because of the way he writes. He's very out there and everything like that. But he was like, no, I was really, I don't want to murder a Scottish accent. But anyway, he was
don't even try.
Don't. I have a great Alan Moore. Anyway, so he was talking about how he loved that there were 70 years of continuity, and how he was actually not excited about doing Rebirth. And found it difficult because it's way more exciting to me that these characters are like these different permutations through time and different decades and stuff like that. And so I think there's a lot to be said for, I get to kind of reinterpret this, and it's not just about like willy-nilly whatever I want to do kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I could. I didn't really think about it that way. I mean, you do have this kind of outline of like, this is kind of the character and this is the characterization of them. This is what they would do. Here's their universe. Have fun. It's kind of like playing in a sandbox. It gives you all the toys.
I mean, it's like the ultimate fan fiction.
Exactly. But in the inverse, you have to make sure you stay true to that.
Exactly.
Because you have the fans and the company and your job on the line.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
It's difficult. I think a lot of times we forget too that like with characters, they're not necessarily this absolutely well-defined silhouette that it's either in there or out there. They're this like constellation of psychical features, as I've heard it described before. And, different people see different things in these characters. And that's why, when you have a writer focus on one thing that has a history in that character, a lot of fans will be like, that's not my Spider-Man. I think Dan Slott, the guy that was writing Spider-Man for a long time recently, for like the last 10 years, he was heavily criticized for writing a not responsible Peter Parker. And interestingly enough, Nick Spencer, the guy that just took it over, who's doing an amazing job, has been in cute ways cleverly kind of lampooning the last 10 years of the lack of responsibility.
I wonder if they ever, with the companies or the writers, so you'll have a writer that will come on and kind of just destroy the character or do something completely out of the character's things, and it's not received well by fans, and the company's kind of like, oh shit. Like, we need to fix this. Hey, get this guy to, like, shit on this word to, like, fix it.
I think the editors do. I don't know. I've never worked in it, so I couldn't say. But I'm sure the editors put pressure in certain ways when decisions, go awry.
We see what they do with the movies, so I don't imagine that they wouldn't do that with the comics.
Yeah. I will say, too, I think a lot... fans should be patient.
Should be.
Because, I was thinking, like, a lot of times they get mad when there are stories where the character gets put in a very low position.
Don't gesture to me.
No. I actually meant from the other end that this was a point you were making earlier. But that if they're deconstructing a character, it's almost always to build it back up.
Yeah.
It's so rare that like somebody like, well, you're writing, I don't know, Batman. Batman is paralyzed and that's it.
Yep. I'm done.
But, of course, the whole point is to create a story where he gets deparalyzed or finds a way to like make cybernetic implants. And you get to ask the question, like, what's the difference? Is Batman just the use of his legs? I don't know. I mean, just improvising.
Yeah, but I feel like fans have experienced things where they've kind of, so me personally with Barry Allen, he was gone forever. Like he died and it was just like, is he ever coming back? Like, I love Wally. Great. We still have a Flash, but I mean, Barry was gone for so long. And then Wally comes back and then he dies again. And it's just like, okay. So there's some things that I agree with fans when they kind of get mad because it's like, oh, finally, like the one character that I was waiting to see. Oh, they're gone again.
That's a good point.
It's like, is this the only thing that character is good for?
I think, man, I'd like to get your opinion on the scale too, because I do sort of agree. It's not to say writers are just by default correct, or every decision they make is just gold or something like that, or that anytime the reader has a complaint that it ought to be ignored. I mean, like, so maybe a way to phrase this question is there a point where, like, what's the divide? Like, when do readers have a case that the writing is bad? Is there a particular kind of...
The customer isn't always right.
Yeah.
So I feel like...
I would say rarely. Working in customer service.
But to your point, I mean, I feel like no matter what, I feel like they should be patient. Because, like I just said, Barry Allen did come back eventually, like the 70,000 writers later.
You should be patient for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean...
That's very patient.
But I feel like now they probably wouldn't do something like that, especially with... Because most people's favorite characters are big iconic characters, or at least some of them. They're not going to go away that long. There might be a change only because, so like Hawkman currently has these big changes going on and he's like finally building back up his universe and you're getting to know Carter Hall and all this stuff. It's amazing. It's different than what Hawkman used to be.
Yeah.
But I feel like those kind of changes and that patience that those Hawkman fans had probably paid off. So I feel like the biggest thing is just patience. I mean, just let it go. You're not writing it. It's going to keep coming out. Like, just wait.
And what do you have a sense of like, or is it just, it when you see it? Like, bad writing when you see it?
I mean, it's part that because everyone has their opinion on what they want to happen. But I think in terms of if you're judging whether it's good writing or not, you should kind of remove yourself from what you want to see happening. And if the actions that you see on the page are in character, if it makes sense, if there's a really good plot going on, if you haven't seen that same batch of dialogue repeated in all sorts of mediums over and over again, then I mean, it's good writing. I can say that there are tropes like death of characters that I feel are overused, especially now. And again, not just limited to comic books, but because of the dangerous nature of these heroes and the lives they lead, death happens sometimes in their lives. But I feel like writers that are kind of lazy rely on death as the sole source of tragedy. So to that point, I think, they could be a little bit more creative. There are other sad things that could happen in life other than death.
I mean, I think that's why, like, when I read a comic, I look for the drama and the relationships between the people, because that's so fresh.
Yeah.
You never know what they're going to do, like with their internal relationship. So that to me is more exciting than them dying, because it's like, yeah, they're probably just going to come back, or it's probably a dream, or Black Mercy probably had them, or blah, blah, blah. Like,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you, Jered, were mentioning something before we even started recording about.
Oh yeah, can I?
Yeah.
Warren Ellis was talking about. He was asked, "Is it hard to create stakes, to create drama in a medium where the assumption is no one's going to die?" And Warren Ellis, and we've talked about this in the podcast, and I wish I'd heard it before, because he made a really interesting point. It was like, well, I don't really think most readers are coming back for that, and he was like, well, that's not really where the drama comes from. It is whether they're going to die. It's, whether they'll live up to their sort of heroism, or like whether they'll be depicted correctly, or whether they'll disappoint themselves. And the funny thing is that you put it in that context, you're like, oh wait, most of the media that I read that is dramatic and has stakes, people don't die in it. And I don't think they're going to die. Yeah. But I'm still curious what's going to happen, because drama isn't only, I think usually there's a lot of explosions and punching and claws. And
destruction
guns.
Of property.
So there's a kind of like, well, wouldn't some of them die? But the point is that you can create drama without relying on these kind of, at this point, maybe cliche tropes. It probably wasn't until maybe recently, like maybe in the 90s, where you assumed people were going to die.
Yeah.
I think in the 80s and beforehand, if a character died, especially one that was established, that was just...
Yeah.
Well,
it went from being just in neighborhoods to being in cities.
Yeah.
To being the entire world, to being the entire universe.
Yeah.
So I felt like the bigger they got, the more...
Stakes.
It's like, okay, death. Okay, we killed somebody. Okay, now everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
Okay, no, everybody's going to come back, but we're going to keep killing this character because people really like this character. And it's like, okay, I got it. Like, we don't need that. But I agree. Like, I feel like the hero's journey, or seeing the hero fall from being a hero to come back up and all that, that is much more entertaining. Yeah. And I feel like personally, that's what I look for. And a lot of other people do. And also just to see cameos. Mm-hmm. You get to see Kite Man.
I agree.
And Rebirth. When was he in
I feel like you have to see Kite Man.
I think that's good writing, because they're like, oh, this is like not like a deep cut, but this is somebody that is part of this character's history. Why would they not interact with them when they're in the same place?
Yeah, and it's fun to see it when it does happen. I think where the fans have a case is that writers are in some sense a steward of these characters, and they don't own these characters. This is very much what you're talking about with the IP issue. I think, so the fans in a collective sense were there beforehand, and they also created the interest of the character. Like, in other words, like...
Depending on how well it's sold.
Absolutely. But with these big characters, like, the fans made Wolverine, in a sense. Not Rick Remender or somebody like that. Mm-hmm. So I do think that it's probably appropriate that writers come in with the sort of understanding, I suppose, that they didn't make that character. They're not the occasion for which this character is being written, or whatever. But outside of that, as a fan, and especially because I want the artist to do good work so I can enjoy it, I think they need as much freedom and as few shitty emails as they can get.
Yeah, I feel like the writers that I like personally, I feel like, because you can see their entire history of what they've written, and you kind of follow this writer's journey, and I like writers that are so versatile with depending on what story they're writing, what character they're writing, and I just think that's great. I feel like somebody that is successful, like probably the ones that we're going to be talking about, they do have the freedom to do that. Yeah. And just seeing the work that they do, I don't know.
And I'll say also, fans have a tendency to really kind of universalize a character through their own experience with that character. So Superman, for a lot of people, is just whatever he was when they got into him. Mm-hmm. There are 4 or 5 people out there who think that Superman is electrical. Because they happen to start reading it during Superman Blue, and they're like, "That's not Superman. Superman is blue, and he's electrical." So.
Yeah, no, he's not.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's that people, we're very demanding about, like, when this it's not how you write this character, forgetting that a lot of times that was often a departure from the classic version that you didn't care about because you didn't read.
Yeah,
So judge not.
Okay, so to get into more specific examples of current writers that we really like what they're doing, I guess this is also kind of a disclaimer. We didn't choose really, 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 really big names because we kind of want to, I don't know, save them for later. Like, no Jeff Johns, no spotlighting Stan Lee, no, like the big, big, big names. But I guess I can start. One person I really like what he did and is doing is Scott Snyder.
Heck yes.
Yeah. Oh my God, a Batman writer. Can you believe?
I was going to say, who? No, I know.
He did The Court of Owls. Have you read that?
Yes.
Yes!
No, I haven't read it. No, but I've seen the movie. Unfortunately.
No.
Unfortunately, in that, I wish that I had read
Yeah.
it. It's on the list, though.
The comic is...
Yeah.
So
I know.
much better and different.
I
Yeah. But a little bit about him. He kind of came to my attention again as New 52 Batman. And I think he got the characterization for Batman, for Alfred, for all the Robins down.
Especially Alfred. I love what he did with Alfred.
Right?
He's a badass.
Yes.
It makes sense with his background.
And I know we mentioned Court of Owls like every episode because it's freaking fantastic, but he also did Death of the Family.
Mm-hmm.
That was really spooky.
Yeah, I mean, Joker cuts his face off.
Yeah,
And then
quite terrifying.
Puts it back on.
Yep, quite terrifying.
Upside down.
Quite terrifying.
That's a lot. just real quick, where do you put him in the Batman comic writers?
Definitely top 5.
You put top 5?
For sure.
Would you go top 5?
Maybe top 3.
Yeah, I would say top 3.
I
That
really
is
like
a
him.
singing endorsement.
I know, yeah. No, I actually, fun fact for Scott Snyder, I've been to San Diego Comic-Con several times. I was fortunate enough to get tickets. I've seen him speak twice.
Ooh.
He's such a funny guy. So witty. I really just, I don't know. There's something special about a person that you can meet and, like a person that you actually get to see speaking at a panel
especially
about their work.
That you kind of look up to or you like their work a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I have a soft spot for Scott Snyder.
I think I do agree with that. I feel like he really shined in New 52.
Yeah.
He's done some really good work recently, but New 52, I mean, that's Jered. You need to read it because the Batman run with that is just so good.
It really
It was
is.
one of, I'm not going to say that New 52 is bad because that would be kind of too, I don't know, generalizing.
Yeah.
Whatever. But it was the one that I think no one complained about. I haven't heard anyone.
Oh, with the Batman.
No,
New
that's
52?
completely true.
Yeah.
It's definitely, they should rename it to Batman.
Yeah.
It's just
Get rid of the New 52. We swear it's good, okay?
Yeah. They're like, man, I don't know about New 52. Oh, if you read Batman, just read Batman. Look at Batman.
Yep.
Here's Batman.
But yeah, a little bit about the guy. To kind of put his writing style, inspiration, and kind of context was he started getting into writing when he was around 9 years old. He went to camp and one of the camp counselors was reading Stephen King to these very, very young people. And he was immediately enamored with the writing style. So kind of already had an inclination to go rather dark.
I get that.
His kind of inspirations in terms of comic book writers while he was kind of honing his craft were Alan Moore and Frank Miller. So, lacks creativity there. But, I don't like Frank Miller. Alan Moore's fine.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm not a big... Well, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. He started out at Marvel, now writes mainly for DC.
Mm-hmm. Thank God, too. With Batman.
Eisner winner several times over. His kind of big start was American Vampire. That was his big project that kind of launched him into popularity, and then he picked up more popular IPs like Batman, and now he can write for basically whatever story he wants to. Also, fun fact, I'm super excited because him and Greg Capullo, who did the New 52 Batman, are coming back to work together. And I think it's, I can't remember what it's called. It's another Batman story, though. And it's a series of writers. It's a collaboration, but they're going to be back together. And I'm super excited to see that.
His 1000th episode. Or issue.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yep.
He also did Batman Eternal, which I really, really liked. Was a co-writer there, but I love Batman Eternal. And Batman and Robin Eternal, too, which I also really like. So.
What's the concept behind that one? I haven't heard that one yet.
It's just... It has lots of Robins in it. That's my thing. It's not a singular solo Batman story with random cameo appearances. It's just it's really kind of an homage to the universe of Batman and his family. And
wasn't that it was towards the end of New 52? I think
Yeah.
that was
No,
kind
yeah,
of
it was.
the ending of Batman's New 52. So it was just a culmination. It's really long too. I mean, it's the volumes for it are pretty thick.
It's also, it's just impressive, and I know this name's going to come up later, but it's just impressive that you guys are saying such high praise for Scott Snyder, given the fact of who was going to be the writer on Batman afterwards.
Yes.
So the fact that he's still memorable in the wake of is just very impressive.
No, yeah. I mean, because me and Noah, I know, talk about Batman a lot. So the fact that we really appreciate Scott Snyder's run and what he did with Batman, yeah, it's high praise. I really appreciate what he did.
Yeah.
Do I talk about my second person
Yeah, do
now?
your second. Do your second.
All right.
We're all doing two.
Yeah, we're just kind of mentioning two that kind of highlight our qualities and writers that we like. I thought we needed to get a female up in here, so I wanted
a lady girl.
I wanted to talk about Gail Simone. I know I mentioned her briefly about the Secret Six in our Mercenaries episode, which hasn't aired yet. But
oh my god,
I mentioned Gail Simone.
Secret Six is my favorite.
Yeah, so she's been involved in a whole bunch of different projects: Birds of Prey, Secret Six, All New Adam, Batgirl, Wonder Woman, etc., etc., etc. She's basically had like tons of different projects.
Her Wonder Woman.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
Not that it's bad. It's just Greg Ruckus is so reinvented the character. But yeah, no, she's amazing, right?
No, she did amazing stuff with Wonder Woman. I love it.
I like that she not only writes women characters really, really well, but she uses her public platforms like Twitter to talk about the issues that women face in comics, not only the characters, but the people trying to break into the industry. So I just feel like she uses her platform really well. And I feel like that's kind of, like the social media aspect isn't talked about a lot with writers, but I also just like how she communicates with the fans.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was just recently this morning, I was kind of looking through Twitter and I saw her posts. And I mean, just when you see her, you know her work, and then you see how she is in person, it's just like, you're a good person all the way around.
Exactly.
And you're using what's given to you in a good way.
I actually have an example too. She started writing for Batgirl, but when they hired a new editor to come in, and I think his last name is like Cunningham or something like that, and he fired her. And about a couple of months later, because the fan backlash to her firing was so intense, they rehired her back for Batgirl. And I was just like, that's just the perfect example of how important Gail Simone is to the community.
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful to find out that she's a good person in this way, because she writes bad people so well.
Exactly. That's why I was like, not only does she write like Batgirl and Wonder Woman, she does stuff like the Secret Six, where it's like, these are not great people, and she does it really well.
She also is a master in that of the ensemble cast.
Yeah. And that's really hard to do.
Oh, it's one of my favorite team books of all time, and it has very little to do with like, those characters, I love them so much. Most of them I wasn't invested in at all. But she also not like Suicide Squad, which just kills people off willy-nilly for no reason. It's all very organic story, and she's so good. Yeah.
Actually, when I was doing research again for the Mercenaries episode, a lot of the people were like, I didn't like Deadshot until I saw him in the Secret Six.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was her doing.
She just like manages to have him be still realistically a bad guy and make him interesting, because a lot of times the writers feel the need to sort of be like, oh, well, he's not such a sociopath. Look, he's got a daughter.
Yeah, exactly. He has feelings, therefore negates bad.
Yeah, she doesn't. She's just like, they're all bad, but she just makes it compelling.
A little bit about her history is that she started writing for The Simpsons.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Right.
I did not know that, and I'm glad I know that.
I didn't know that either.
And then she started writing for Deadpool.
That makes sense.
She's so versatile.
I know. She has her hands in a lot of different, and she started out not even as a writer. She was a hairdresser that had a degree, or was getting a degree in theater. So
that's how you do it.
She just has, okay. So my resume isn't littered with like all these writing jobs and references. So it's kind of an inspiration as an aspiring writer to see someone that has such a diverse background, like really be successful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought she deserves a lot of attention.
She does. I mean, and most of the writers that we're going to be talking about, they do get awards and they have some recognition within the community, but I feel like they have to be talked about. And they have to be recognized a little more. I mean, it's crazy. Like they do so much for so many people. Yeah. And I don't think they get enough credit for it.
Absolutely.
Jered?
Ooh, okay. My turn. So I'll do my first one real quick, and this is probably not going to come as a huge shock to the listener, but he's doing Thor right now, and it's Jason Aaron.
Yeah!
Yeah, Jason Aaron's a fantastic writer, and there's so many things. I want to list just real quick some stuff that he's done. He's had a pretty short career, but he did Scalped. That's kind of how he made his Bones. It's I won't go, it's like a 10-volume series. That's how he got noticed, and he hadn't been writing a lot before that. I think this huge hit was like his third ever script, the first issue. So it's sort of crazy. And then he got picked up by DC, did I think an issue of the Penguin, or like a small run on the Penguin.
Interesting.
Which is weird because I'm told that his depiction of the Penguin recently is basically the Rebirth Penguin.
Oh, okay.
Or New 52 and Rebirth Penguin.
Yeah.
So for what it just had an impact. And then he's just had a slew of Marvel successes.
Oh, yeah.
So I think
Any particular character in Marvel?
so many, but what's weird? So it's kind of cool. He's one of those writers who has had these different mini careers and known as a so-and-so writer. So he was an X-Men writer for a long time. He led up a lot of the stuff that went into Avengers vs. X-Men, which we talked about. He did a Schism sort of thing. There's a storyline called Schism where it was like Cyclops versus Wolverine.
I love the word Schism.
A lot of people were mad at him in a Cyclops context because he kind of put Cyclops. Did I say Cyclops? Sorry. Lest we skip that.
I tried not to laugh.
No, Cyclops, because he only has one cock. So, okay. You can, anyway.
Why?
Here's the thing. Because it's worth saying. Anyway, here's the thing.
What if Jason Aaron listens to this?
He'll probably giggle, I think. But anyway, so people got mad at him because he kind of Cyclops goes through a road of a dark place. Anyway, but so he's an X-Men guy, really successful. And then I think there was a few things. He did Punisher Max, which was really cool.
Yeah.
But then I think what we know him as now, he put on Thor.
Yeah.
And absolutely fantastic. And Doctor Strange. And I think those were big sort of salient moments for him.
My favorite Thor run. That I've read.
Absolutely.
I mean, the whole Jane Thor. I've said it before.
So
already.
I'm glad you mentioned the Jane Thor, but I think that almost undersells the thing that he did. He sandwiched it. So one of the things I love about Jason Aaron is the tonal variety when he writes. So if you just take his Thor stuff, and I know I love the character and everything like that, but he writes this God of Thunder, which is the sort of regular Thor, which has this dark and epic feel. With Esad Ribic. Then he does this with Russell Dauterman, the Jane Thor one, and it ends up being just the tone is completely different. It's way more contemporary and standard superhero fare. And now he's doing another Thor series, it's just Thor, I think. And it's like a romp and swashbuckling.
Yeah.
Like the movie, I don't know how you write three things back to back where all amazing, connected, and it feels like you're a different writer.
Yeah.
It's just insane. Another great thing about him is that he is really good, and he hasn't been doing it that long, but of weaving together coherent stories over years. So I think we're going to get to this later. War of Realms is coming out, which is a story that's been cooking in Thor comics, literally for 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
And it hasn't lost steam. I'm fascinated with that. So
they're really pushing for it too. And I think they should. Yeah. I mean, just the whole lead up to it is, I'm excited for it, and I'm not that big of a Thor fan.
What's amazing, and it will, if you're a Marvel fan, it's going to be one of those like whole Marvel universe kind of things. So that's cool. Another thing that's amazing as a crossover, it is so seldom in crossovers where it is earned in the sense that it's been going on for a while, and then they have the culmination. Here. Exactly, as opposed to like all of a sudden upheaval. There's a story now.
Yeah.
Doctor Strange is one of my favorite Marvel characters. I really did enjoy his run for what he developed that character into.
Yeah.
He completely changed magic and how it is in the Marvel Universe with that character, and I loved the execution with it.
He's been somewhat controversial. I agree with that wholeheartedly. He's been controversial on that basis, but it's also what I think is strong about him, which he's really, I think, consistent with the characterization, and he doesn't do much there, but he'll go on a series and there'll be like upheaval. So there'll be a big paradigm shift or something like that. With Doctor Strange, the idea was that magic was dying in the Marvel
Well, it
universe.
had a cost, and then
Yeah.
there was this race that hated magic, so
Yeah.
they killed it.
The
I thought it was
empirical.
good. Yeah.
No, I think
Because you got to see Doctor Strange like slinging axes around.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he is a martial artist too, guys.
and going back to that thing that we mentioned before, where the difference between good writing and choices you don't necessarily like.
Yeah, because I definitely did not like it at first.
Yeah.
And then as it kept going on, I was like, oh, I'm okay with this. Like, I see why he's doing it.
So yeah, for all those reasons, I think Jason Aaron is just amazing. Got anything else? And then that pretty much covers it. He's really good. And also really good blend of adventure and storytelling.
Yeah.
So really good storytelling and that character development stuff, but also he's going to blow up some planets. People are going to get into a knife fight. It's just, there's no skimming that. So I think any of his stuff is good. My number 2. Yeah, exactly. He's great.
Fanboying over here.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Which I have to speak to that just real quick. So many Thor writers hate him because of the Jane thing.
But I was going to say, to his credit, that's so well written,
It
though.
is. Yeah.
I mean, as a non-Thor fan, he made me a Thor fan.
Yeah.
With that. And it's not because it wasn't Thor. It's because the story was so
Well,
good.
Thor's in there the whole time.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I mean, it is kind of weird. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I like Thor now because of when Thor wasn't Thor.
There's a kind of, if the first 6 movies in Star Wars, a lot of people have kind of made that kind of claim or analysis that this is really Darth Vader's story. In a certain way, the whole thing is Darth Vader's story. And in a similar way, it's like Thor is still in the background. So even if you miss your hero and hate women, I don't know. I think there is a lot of misogyny attached to it.
Oh, yeah.
This larger broad story is still very much a Thor story about like fall from grace and redemption. So, get on board, you guys and you dummies. Okay. Anyway, great stuff. Second pick.
Yes.
I think we all will agree. Warren Ellis.
Yeah.
I love him.
Fantastic writer.
He stole this person from me, by the way.
I did. We do this a lot where it's like, I'm going to do something. Yoink. Taking it. He's got some amazing stuff. He kind of cut his teeth on a few things. Transmetro was, I think, where he really got big. He'd been around for a while, but Transmetro was like a property owned kind of thing he did with Derek Robertson. Really good, kind of a futuristic gonzo journalism kind of thing. But what's really interesting to me about Warren Ellis is what he represents in comics. Because for a long time in comic writers and artists, the idea was you had these people that were very like, again, in the Stanley Jack Kirby tradition, very like, it's like from the newspaper writer world where they're very J. Jonah Jameson, like we got deadlines and everything like that, and very meat and potatoes, like give me an octopus man, he's got to fight, we got 3 stories got to come out this week. But then in the 80s, you begin seeing these auteurs and writers that had a kind of quality that you didn't see in comics before. And I would never crap on earlier comics. But I think there was a time when you could say, okay, these comics, they might be fun and have some myths in them, but the writing's not as good as the novels I read.
Yeah.
And around the 80s, and especially in the early 90s, you just can't really make arguments that way anymore. The writers that are the biggest writers, I mean, I was reading both, and I was like, no, they're better novels. Like some comics are better novels than the novels I'm reading or whatever. Names like Frank Miller, Garth Ennis, Alan Moore. Well, I'm just saying he can't in that respect.
in
the
time
crime
frame,
genre.
In that time frame, Frank Miller's like my guy.
You can't. It's hard to argue. I mean, again,
And Alan Moore.
Yeah.
Alan Moore, yeah. Frank
Alan
Miller.
Moore,
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman is another one. Just these amazing writers or whatever. And Warren Ellis comes out of that tradition. But the reason I mention him and what I love about him is, of all of them, he's also seems to be the most comfortable in also conventional superhero comics.
Yeah.
So he brings the like esoteric, crazy, dark, realistic stuff, and he does isolated stuff. He's the master of the miniseries. He's got there's a bunch of stuff where Warren Ellis will just be like, I don't know, he's just like, let me do a 6-issue Spider-Man, and he does, or whatever. And then, so he's just really amazing.
He has the writing career that I want. It's because he's across platforms. Plus,
Absolutely.
he's very witty. I love his wit.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean, like, he writes novels. He writes for, again, like I love Castlevania on Netflix. So good.
That's right.
He writes for like television. He just does a whole bunch of different things. And that's kind of how my mind works. I have like 7,000 different projects and none of them are in the same medium or genre. One's a game, one's a novel, and I'm like, I want this guy's career.
Yeah. No, he's fantastic. And I'm glad you mentioned the comedy thing because like it's not easy to write.
Yeah.
It just isn't. And the fact that he's so good at it, he did a series called Next Wave for Marvel, which is a straight up comedy. It's slapstick, it's silly, and it's one of the funniest things I've ever read.
Yeah.
And he'll also do insanely dark stuff. But yeah, so I think what I really love about him is he just takes the quality that we associate from, these almost like postmodern writers. And then he'll also do a meat and potatoes. I love using that phrase. Meat and potatoes.
I hate that phrase for some reason.
I think it's because I love it. So it's
Makes sense.
meat and potatoes writer, like superhero stories that also have that kind of arty stuff. His Thunderbolts run. You wouldn't know it was this guy who was also just. He's like Alan Moore without his head and his ass. I love Alan Moore, but I'm just like, yeah. No, I love Alan Moore. it feels somewhat less pretentious in a way. It's like every bit as interesting and artistic and, hitting the frontiers of the imagination, but, you don't have to be, a nerd. No. You don't have to be a Wiccan to like him, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Good choices.
I almost feel like I don't have to recommend Warren Ellis because, of course, you're into him. If you read comics.
Yeah, if you watch television, if you read comics, if you read books.
Exactly.
Yeah, some of these people, there's no way you haven't either heard of them, read something by them, or watched something by them. They're all over the place.
Yep, absolutely.
Good reason to.
Noah, I believe it is your turn.
It is my turn. So, 2 Batman writers we're talking about today. Surprise.
I mean, if you know us at all.
We really got to get Batman on this podcast, I think.
Oh, man, I would love that. Just any of these writers could be Batman.
Yeah.
I'd be fine with it.
People would be like, you sound a lot like Bruce Wayne. That's really...
So, the first one I'm going to talk about is Tom King. He is super popular right now.
The Rebirth.
Yeah, for good reason. He's done amazing things, especially with Batman and Rebirth. He did Mr. Miracle. The reason why I kind of wanted to talk about him is because prior in the episode I talked about how I love the relationships and seeing these superheroes in normal elements or seeing them outside of the whole superhero aspect. And his whole Batman run. So I feel like the overlying theme of it is Selina and him. It's their love story. That's the entire thing. Whatever happens in the middle happens. I mean, if you've read this Batman series that he's created and came up with so far, I think it is one of the best comic runs I've ever read, only because you really get to see this love story develop. And I feel like you can't get to happiness without getting shit first, because to really truly be happy, you have to be able to find your way back to it. And I feel like he's just doing it so well with this whole Catwoman and Batman thing. I love it so much. And then what he did with Mr. Miracle, I know, Jered, you read it too.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
It's okay. No, it may be one of the most interesting comic books that's been written in the last 10 years. It's in terms of ambition, it's insane. And
the character,
just
the character he chose to write about. I mean, scot-free. Who would have thought that
this guy is making his bones? He's done Batman, but he's making his bones on telling people, look, the character that you don't think is interesting, for the reasons you're saying they're not interesting, I'm going to show you're exactly wrong. He did Vision.
Yeah.
And it's a domestic drama. He's not human enough. It's like, well, I'm going to put him in the suburbs, and it is absolutely fantastic. Mr. Miracle, very different, but very good.
I mean, that's what I feel like that this writer does. I mean, he either takes what people either say that they are, that they don't like, or like Mr. Miracle is kind of like, who? What does he do?
Or he's silly.
Yeah, he is.
So what's the first thing that happens in that comic book?
He's killing himself on the bathroom floor.
Exactly. In the most gritty, realistic way. That's not a spoiler just because it's literally the first panel.
I said that like 3 episodes ago. But no, I love it because everybody knows Mr. Miracle and Big Barda are in a relationship. You have their entire relationship in this 12 miniseries comic. But seeing them go back to Apocalypse, because that's where they're both raised, seeing them be on the beach and going to dates and then having a baby and then killing Darkseid and then all this stuff, it's so well done.
It's great that you've said what you liked about comics beforehand, because this is exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
This is, especially Mr. Miracle, they go to Apocalypse and they half the time, and it's exactly that. It's not pulling punches. It is a crazy ass Jack Kirby fight scene. And then they pick out like they argue about which bassinet they're going to have for the baby.
Yeah, and
it's
one thing
perfect.
that I kind of visually that I loved about that comic, side note, is you have like scot-free, going to interviews and stuff, because in the real world he is a celebrity.
Yeah.
But you have him like wearing like Superman t-shirts. Like his kid Jacob has like a Batman toy, and it's just so cool that he plays with that aspect.
Yeah, they're in that world.
Exactly.
Yeah, very casual.
And then the other author that I wanted to talk about is Brian K. Vaughan. I love this guy so much because he doesn't hold back. Yeah. He puts you in that world and does not care if you're uncomfortable or not.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done stuff like Paper Girls, which is insanely good. I mean, if you like Stranger Things, you would like that comic.
Oh, wait, are you talking about Brian Box of Tissues? Kayla? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know that guy.
Yeah, the one that wrote Saga that is just destroying people's hearts.
I was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about this other writer, is that I love authors that just don't care if you're uncomfortable. Like, they're telling this story, they're putting you in this world. He's created how many worlds? I mean, like 10, 15 different worlds, and they're so amazing. I mean, I know you really like Saga. I got you into Saga because it needs to be read.
I'll say there's something in his humor that reminds me a lot of Warren Ellis's dark wit,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I haven't read Pride of Baghdad, which...
It's what's interesting about that is that Brian K. Vaughan has proven his ability to do these long stories, which is its own talent. But Pride of Baghdad is also the sort of opposite. It's a very short series, and it's absolutely poignant. It was in a lot of ways like a commentary on the Iraq War too, because what happens is that there was an actual story about like a bunch of lions that escaped the Baghdad Zoo after the invasion. And it's their little story anthropomorphized, and the war is around it. So it was this really smart way of sort of talking about politics in a kind of like oblique way, in a kind of, exactly. So it didn't feel ham-handed, but it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the points that I wanted to make about him, because I mean, Why the Last Man, you have Saga, Paper Girls. These aren't just short stories or like him doing a run on something. He's created this entire world, and they're like lifelong.
He's got the Stephen King genius of saying, I'm going to make the most realistic and lovable character ever. I'm going to ruin their lives.
Yeah.
I think there's just something in his writing that shows how intelligent he is as a person too, in a way that I really respect. Yeah. He's not only a great writer, but the topics that he's choosing to talk about and the way he's choosing to talk about them, I feel shows like he is such a smart man.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he's kind of transcended some of the things that comic book writers kind of aspire to do.
Yeah.
He's just, and he's worked on movies. He's kind of done the War of Silence thing. He's a showrunner.
I want these careers.
He did do Under the Dome, which I did not care for at all.
Sure.
But he was just a showrunner, so I'll let that pass.
Well, also there's something to be said for he's one of the biggest comic writers now who hasn't really worked, or at least made his bones on superhero stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he isn't just appreciated in sort of like, art nerd circles. It's like comic fans love him because it's just really good storytelling.
I mean, I believe, isn't the only superhero one that he did was Runaways?
That sounds right.
Yeah. I think that's the only thing that he did from Marvel or DC.
Pretty different.
Yeah.
Runaways is great, but it doesn't... You feel like they're in the world, but even then, he doesn't really refer to much of the larger Marvel universe or anything like that.
But I feel like that's where his strength lies.
Absolutely.
He likes to kind of create his own worlds within the bigger picture, that universe.
Tiny pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
And I, like, again, I mean, we talk about graphic novels, and that's a lofty way to talk about comic books. But Why the Last Man is one of my favorite novels of all time. It happens to be in comic book form, but just in terms of the quality of writing, the story, that it has theme, it's meaningful, it's as good as it gets. And it's a great novel, yeah.
That's how I feel about Paper Girls.
Yeah.
I really feel like
I gotta read that.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Just even the artwork alone, too. Because he is definitely one of the ones that his artist really needs to match up with the theme that he's going for.
Sure, that makes
because
sense.
like Saga, I could not imagine anybody else aside from Fiona Staples doing that artwork. I mean, it's really good. I like both of them a lot. All right, comic book recommendation time.
As we do.
This one is really easy. You can essentially guess the ones that we're going to recommend.
Probably because we talked about them.
I disagree. I'm about to shock
you always have to
everybody's-
be weird.
I'm going to shock you.
You always take the most time for Rex anyway.
That's true.
Jered.
I really think about the thing none of you are going to follow up on. So very
And the one that you have to like go to the actual archive at the headquarters to get.
maybe. We'll see.
So for Tom King, this is kind of difficult to pick between Mr. Miracle or Batman, but I'm just going to say Batman only because
They were hard, right? It's kind of hard to write down.
I mean, it is, but I already recommended Mr. Miracle, so read Rebirth Batman if you haven't. I'm pretty sure you have if you're listening to us because we've talked about it a lot, but it's just really well done. It's beautiful in every aspect, art, story, everything. Read it. Tom King, Batman, Rebirth. Very easy. And then Brian K. Vaughan is a little harder because all his works are so different, but I would say Paper Girls because it's the one that he's currently reading, because I think they took a year hiatus on Saga after that terrible cliffhanger that they left with the last issue. But read Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan. It's his current one. It's so good. It's beautiful. It's lots of tragedy, coming of age story, time travel, aliens. It's great.
Throw a dart at a random word and it's going to be there.
Yes. All right, Kayla.
All right, yeah. So for Scott Snyder, I'm going to recommend Court of Owls again. Just kidding. But seriously, read it. I'm going to do Batman Volume 3 for New 52. It's Death of the Family. I'm recommending it because everyone at this point should know how I feel about the Joker. But I feel like this is a really good representation of Batman versus Joker's mentalities. Mm-hmm. And even on a more human level, what happens in that is it causes a gigantic rift between Bruce and his children, and in just real raw, very in character way. So I feel like that's a really good representation of all of those factors that I like.
It definitely has a good family drama aspect to it.
Exactly. And then for Gail Simone, it was harder because she's done so many different things. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go with Birds of Prey. Just read Birds of Prey. It's a lot of interesting women interacting. She does a good job. So
it's a powerhouse of women too.
Yeah, exactly. That's and really interesting dynamics go on in that comic. So
I'm excited for the movie. Just saying.
I know, me too.
I can't.
I am too. You came around. I think you were a bit skeptical at first.
At first, yes, but the more I hear about it, and I'm gonna just trust them. I was a little skeptical about Aquaman.
Going with an open mind,
yes,
as you should do.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Form my own damn opinion.
And for Jered.
Okay, so this one I'm gonna be I'm different on this one. Jason Aaron never recommended something that's so current, but I have reason. He just released Conan the Barbarian.
Interesting.
Which Noah's rolling his eyes at. No, right. You're actually not. That's funny. But here's the thing. I watched an interview with Jason Aaron recently, and he always wanted to do Conan the Barbarian.
Aww.
So he had to wait till he got a certain amount of status, and you can tell he convinced Marvel to let him do it.
That's adorable.
I read the first issue. The issue is awesome. By the way, it's Mahmoud Asrar is the artist, and the artist is great, and covers by Esad Ribic, just for good measure. So I'm really a fan of this, even though it's the first issue. Mm-hmm. Hopefully it'll keep going, and read that with us. Okay, anyway. And for Warren Ellis, I really anguished over this one.
That's hard.
I know. I was thinking about doing The Authority, but I ultimately...
I love The Authority.
It's so good. It's so good, and, that too. But I chose... Black Summer. Now, this is a bit obscure, but it is one of my favorite comic books of all time. It's self-contained. I think you'll see it. It's collected together, 6 to 9 issues somewhere in there. I don't want to spoil the concept too much, but it's about these awesome superhumans with guns who go into retirement, and they all kind of go crazy or weird or corrupt in their own ways, and it's their story. And the art is by this guy, Juan Jose Rip. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Mm-hmm. This came out in 2007. The art is fantastic. And so it's
a twofer.
I can't I'll put it this way. Everything that you love about Warren Ellis, it's that cubed. And it's so good. Check it out.
Hey, thanks, guys.
As always. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates. Get to talk about writers today, like myself.